Welcome back to the ETF Inspector. It's Sunday, September 7th, just before 4 p.m., and this is our week look ahead and payment guesstimate video for LFGY. That's YieldMax's crypto industry option income ETF. Before we get into it, I'm on X at ETF_Inspector1, where I post all things related to the videos that I put out and the ETFs that I cover. And speaking of that, the week look ahead and guesstimate video for Ulti and Salty is out if you haven't caught that one already. All right, as far as LFGY is concerned, if we take a look at the stock chart for the past week. Sorry, it takes a minute to get to it. Okay, as far as the week's concerned, they were down 3.77%, starting the week in the low 35s, ending the week just below 34. There was a 44-cent dividend there that came out of the share price on Thursday, but not a great week, not a great month, not a great 6 months or 3 months. So a little bit of struggle, but we're just going to go ahead and give the information for how they've performed this past week and how they are looking for the week ahead. So when we go through, if you missed any of the weekday videos, Monday through Friday, or this past week it would be Tuesday through Friday, we talked about each and every trade that was made on the daily basis. It was actually a relatively low amount, only 105 trades over the course of the 4-day week. So when we're coming up with our guesstimate, the first thing we take a look at is the options income. So on Monday, they had a credit of almost $79,000. On Tuesday, there was a credit of $155,000. Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday, it was a debit of almost $69,000. And then on Friday, they brought in $757,000 as far as closing and rolling the remaining positions into the next week. So all in all, that was a $923,000 credit or income for the week from options trading. So if we start off with that, sorry, my dog likes to hang out right next to me and make a bunch of noise right while I'm making a video. So if we take that, we divide it by the outstanding shares, we would come up with a distribution of 17.43 cents per share. That's obviously well below what they've been paying recently, so we don't think that that's going to be the payment. Next, we revert to the IV, or the implied volatility of the fund. So to come up with that, we're going to have to take a small detour each week. On Saturday, once markets have had their chance to settle out for the week, I go over to Market Chameleon and I look up each of the underlyings and get their updated 30-day IV. Now we know it's really more based on the 7-day, especially since it's they're paying based off of how they performed the past week, but 7-day is not as readily available. There are formulas for it. It works out a little better in Google Sheets. And just the way my spreadsheets are set up, it's not seeming to work out. So this is just helping us get a ballpark for our guesstimate anyway, so we're okay with that as well. Just understand this isn't a perfect calculation. This is getting us a ballpark. Perfect calculation would include the IV of every trade that was made when it was made, and we don't have access to that information. I could look up the IV of the trade, but I don't know the timing from when they made it. So this is just our ballpark. I do a weighting where I divide the value of that particular underlying by the value of all of the underlyings, and then that tells how much weight to apply to each of the IVs, and that's how I come up with the calculation. So for starters, Bitmine Immersion Technologies went up this past week to 105%. They're only about 2.3% of the overall value out of the underlyings. They're not quite as evenly allocated. Before I go further into it, right? We've got lows in the twos. Sometimes it even gets down into the ones. We've got highs that get up over 10. At times we've even had, at one point we had Coinbase with 16% of the money in there. So the average is about 4.76. So we kind of just rate it based off of that. So below average amount of money in Bitmine immersion, and that one's got the highest volatility. Next, BitDeer's got 3.75% of the weighting, and 83.7% IV is a decrease from last week. CleanSpark, 3.38% of the money. 65.4% IV is an increase from last week. Another increase from Coinbase, 51.5%. That's going along with 7.66% of the money. So that's obviously above average amount of money in them. Core Scientific, 4.39% of the money, decreased in IV this past week to 64.2%. Circle Internet Group was an increase to 67.6 over the past week. That's the percentage on the IV. 2.62% of the money. Just under 5% of the money in iShares Ethereum Trust ETF, 4.96%. That decreased this past week to 72.1% IV. Galaxy Digital neither increased nor decreased. It was right at 74, unless I just forgot to, we'll double check it. Yep, 74. Okay. So normally I would put a plus/minus, but I must have forgot to there. So it didn't increase or decrease. 3.36% of the money. GameStop, 3.21% of the money, had an increase to 63.2% IV. Robinhood, 6.34% of the money, increased to 61.4% IV. Hut 8 Corp's IV increased to 88.4% with 5.46% of the money within it. iShares Bitcoin Trust ETF, has 10.37% of the money, so it's our largest holding within it. It decreased this past week to 35.7%. Mara Holdings decreased to 64.3% and has about 5.8% of the money. Mercado Libre has 4.42% of the money and 31% IV. That's an increase from last week. Another increase is 58.9% for Strategy or MicroStrategy with 8+% of the money in there. NU Holdings, another one that stayed flat, 32.4% IV, 5.15% of the money. NVIDIA, 2.1% of the money, decreased to 33.5% IV. Opera has 4.59% of the money and increased to 42.1% on the IV. PayPal Holdings increased to 28.5% and it has 2.88% of the money. Riot Platforms, 5.14% weighting, 70.4% IV. That's an increase. And Block, now I finally used the plus or minus. So we had, so that's another one. It says stayed even. I must have miscounted. But 37.6% with 4.09%. So that's 19, 21. Must have forgotten to put the symbol on one of them. But 12 increased, 7 decreased, and 2 stayed the same. All right, so that overall brings our weighted average to 56.92%. There's your big long formula for that. And that is a decrease from last week. LFGY closed at 33.99. That's a decrease from last week too. So we're going to end up with an estimate lower than last week. So when we take all of that math into account, we come up with a 37.17 cent distribution. Now we're going to go ahead and look at their past distributions and see. So recently we've been getting 44 cents. We had a 41 in there, 43s. We used to get 47s, 48s, 46s, 47s, 48s. There's a 40. So 40 cents is the lowest the fund has ever paid, 40.88. So we take that into account, the math, the payouts, everything that they've been doing, and come up with our guesstimate based off of all that. And what I came up with is 42.5 cents. So I don't think they're going to break their record and pay out their lowest ever. but it's still possible. But my guess is they're going to pay out 42.5 cents, which would be about a 65% annual yield. All right, next, switching over, we're going to take a look at how we are positioned for the week ahead. So we're going to look at each of the calls sold or puts sold and see how far in or out of the money they are to get an idea for how much chance we have for capturing income if the underlyings go up, and how much of a chance we have at winning those options trades as compared to having to pay to close them out. So starting off, BitMine Immersion Technologies closed at 42.04. They've got calls sold at 45, 962 of them, 7% out of the money, expiring Friday. They look good. The strategy within LFGY, for the most part, it's a covered call strategy. Now, that's not to say that that's all they do. So a lot of times these are call spreads. When you've got calls sold, you can tell by the negative amount of shares, and then calls purchased. So then those are preventing them from having to pay too much money in the event the stock just went to the roof. They do not have puts purchased, protecting the share values in the event things go down. That's more of an ulti thing. And then when we see other strategies, I'll talk about them as well. BitDeer Technology sold calls, 5,340 of them at $13.50, expiring Friday. They're 9.3% out of the money. Clean Spark was 924 at close. They've got 950s sold for this week. That's not a lot. 2.8% out of the money. So stock's got 26 cents to run before it kind of hits a cap, a ceiling. But that's why you pay for that 1.3, 1.4% management fee. They're actively trading it. They will close these out and open new ones to try to bring in more income and open back up the upside. Coinbase Global, 299.07 closing, 315 is the strike price on the calls sold for the 12th, 5.3% out of the money. Core Scientific closed at 1362 on Friday. $14 is the strike price on those 5,671 calls, 2.79% out of the money. Circle Internet Group, 114.56 closing price Friday. That's 9.1% out of the money on those sold 125 calls. ETHA, that's iShares Ethereum Trust ETF, they've got calls sold at 36. They're almost 10% out of the money with the price closing on Friday at 32.77. They've got about $1.7 million in government funds, and then another $183,000 in cash. So not a lot sitting on the sideline. What's that? Right around 1.8. Galaxy Digital, $23.49 closing price, $24 sold strike price, 2.1% out of the money. GameStop's got calls sold at 24. This one's an interesting one because they will be announcing earnings on Tuesday. So this they're 6% out of the money with the closing price Friday at $22.61. Robinhood Markets, 101.25 is where it closed. They've got calls sold at 104 and 109. They're 2.7 and 7.6% out of the money. Unfortunately, pretty much all of them are at the 104. There's only 11 contracts at 109, and we are going to open up on Monday with all of these being, well, with the majority of them being already in the money because Robinhood got added to the S&P 500 after hours on Friday. So after hours trading took them up 6% to 107.33. Don't expect them to drop much from that. So they might even run some more. But in any case, those 104s will no longer be 2% out of the money. They will be pretty deep in the money, or decently in the money. Hut 8 Corp, 25.38 closing price, $27 strike price, 6.3% out of the money. iShares Bitcoin Trust, that's IBIT, IBIT right there. They don't trade options on it, so we just want it to go up. 63.42 is where it closed on Friday. Mara Holdings closed at 15.19. They've got 16s sold for Friday. They're 5.3% out of the money. MBTX, they don't own any shares. They just trade options on it. They've got a call credit spread, selling the 280s that are 6% out of the money after the stock closed on, or I'll call that the fund closed at 264.01. They also have a put debit spread where they purchased the 255s as the way to generate income. They're currently 3.4% out of the money. You want them to go in the money. When you purchase options, you want them to go in the money. When you sell options, you want them to stay out of the money. Mercado Libre, 24.17.49 closing price, 24.30 strike price. That one's going to be tight, 0.5% out of the money. Got to make it a whole week without going up 0.5%. Otherwise, they're just going to have to buy to close these and roll them to a higher strike and possibly further outdate. Strategy, formerly MicroStrategy, stock ticker still MSTR. Wish they would have left the name alone. 335.87 closing price, 342.50 and 345 are the strike prices on the calls sold. Just about 2 and 2.7% out of the money. That first strike price, only 4 contracts compared to the 416 at the further out of the money. So that's a good thing. NU Holdings, 14.74 closing price, $15 strike price. They're 1.76% out of the money, or 26 cents. And when I say these numbers, that's how much the stock can go up before it hits what would be considered a cap or a ceiling. And then once it goes beyond that, then the cost to close out will move up equivalently with the increase in the shares, so you won't really see an increase in your overall fund value because one thing's getting more expensive at the same rate that the other is becoming more valuable. NVIDIA Corp closed at 167.02. They've got 172.50 sold as the strike price on the calls, 3.2% out of the money. Opera, 17.82 closing price. They've got calls sold at $17.50 and $19. Those 17.50s obviously are in the money by 32 cents or 1.8%. The $19 strikes are 6.6% out of the money. But again, you've got 100 times more contracts at that in the money strike. So these are, as you can see, pretty inconsequential. We're looking at $600 worth versus $347,000 in values. PayPal, 68.26 is the closing price. They've got a put spread sold, credit put spread. So they sold the 71s to generate income, purchased 69s in the event the stock continues to drop further than that. Limits how much they could lose. They're 4% in the money, so they really need to be selling call spreads on PayPal rather than put spreads, because we keep selling put spreads and it keeps on going down. Riot Platforms, $13.29 closing price. They've got $14 calls sold, expiring Friday, 5.3% out of the money. And Block closed at $74.94. Here's another one that's a put spread as opposed to the standard call spread. They sold the 77s. They're currently 2.75% in the money. All right, so that is how we look for the week ahead. Again, we talked about the distribution guesstimate. My guess is 42.5. They made enough to pay 17. The rough numbers that we have, again, they're not perfect by any means, would say 37. We always know that that's on the low side, so it's going to be above that because we're not getting the information for every option trade. So 42.5 is my guess. Okay, assets under management, $180 million. There's 5.3 million outstanding shares. The NAV is currently at 34.08. So if you were purchasing at the end of the day on Friday, you were getting it at a discount. Let's see if it went up in the after hours to straighten that out. It did. Then that and even more. So generally, you're not going to be able to buy these for less than what they're worth, because it's practically just buying money at its value. So if you've got $34 worth of stuff here and you get to pay less than $34 for it, then that's a deal, and the whales won't let those deals go. So it got bought back up well beyond that. So, all right, that's all I have for you. Thank you for watching. I've got a dad joke for you. So before I do, thank you for everything, likes, shares, comments, all the support. You guys are great. And you make this making these videos fun. I enjoy talking to you guys in the chats and the comments and everything like that too. So, okay, dad joke of the day. Why can chickens only make one sound? They can't think outside the box. Have a good rest of your weekend. I'll catch you in the Monday videos.